Well, hello there, I'm Anxious Cynic, and you want to know how to make Minecraft animations, and you've come to the right place because we're going to start today with a tutorial of Mine-imator version 2.0. So let's just hop right into it. You want to get this software, so first you're going to need to download it. We're going to do a speed run of that process. And you might think it's simple, but there's actually a little bit more to downloading Mine-imator if you want the latest version. We're here at Mine-imator.com. You come to the site, you scroll down, you go download, perfect. Seems simple, but no, these are not what you want unless you want the older version of Mine-imator 1.2.9. Right here in this little note that seems a little bit easy to miss is version 2.0. You click learn more and it takes you to the Mine-imator forums where you have the anniversary update. This is the Mine-imator 2.0 version. However, you may not want this version either because the developer of this version, Nimi, is retired. So what we want to do is actually go to the continuation build, the community build. So if you want the most up-to-date version of Mine-imator 2.0, this is the place you need to come to, the Mine-imator 2.0 continuation build page of the forums. I'll have a link to this page in the description, but you're going to come down here to the continuation build and you can find and download the latest version. So now that you've gotten Mine-imator downloaded and ready to go, you're going to get this screen here and we're going to click in new project and you're just going to do what you might expect. You're going to name and create your project. And so we've opened up into Mine-imator here. When you first start this up, you may get a notification that you're in simple mode. If you look over here, it says simple mode enabled. Click on that. And what you need to do to get the advanced mode features, which you most definitely will want to do, is go to Mine-imator.com/upgrade, and it might prompt you to donate. You don't have to. It's encouraged to do so if you want to keep the site up and the development going and all that stuff, but you don't have to. But you'll do that process, you'll get the code, and then you want to just paste your code into here. And as you can see, once you put in that code, you now have the ability to switch to advanced mode. We're going to click enable, and then now we don't have that little prompt anymore, and we have new render settings. If you go into this, we click custom and we've got all sorts of things that we can play with in there. For now, I'm just going to leave that on default. So just basic setups. It depends on what frame rate you want to export at. Let's say generally people want to do 30 frames per second. This starts out at 24 by default. We're just going to put the tempo up to 30, and what that means is that every frame in this at 30 tempo will mean it's 30 frames per second. If you want to do 60 frame per second animation, which is kind of ridiculous, but if you did want to do it, you'd put this number to 60, and that way for every frame in the timeline you will have one frame of actual animation in your output. I'm also going to up my resolution to a full 1080p, and that's pretty good for our project settings. So let's just go ahead and go to the workbench. This is how we're going to spawn in most anything in our scene, and we'll just spawn in a basic character real quick, and as soon as it is spawned in, you will see that it does this, and I can just click anywhere and make them stop. So what you're going to have here is your timeline, and this is the character we just introduced into our scene, and once you click on him, you'll see that you get all these options over here. So we can actually name the object and call him dude. And when we do that, the object info, when we go to our project properties, we go to our library, you'll see that we have the Steve character here, and dude is only reflected in the timeline. Just a little detail for organization to keep in mind is you can actually have multiple instances of this character object. So if I actually go in here, right click, where we get a number of other options, I click duplicate. Now we have two dudes, but only one Steve in our library. So you can have multiple instances of the things that you create in your scene that are in your library. That's pretty much here nor there if you're just getting started, but just to say, if you want to add more characters to your scene and it's going to be the same character model, you don't have to go to the workbench and introduce a new object in your scene. You can actually just duplicate an existing one, and of course, you know, rename it. We're going to name this one Dude 2, and now we have two dudes, and they're two separate objects, boop, just like that, but we technically only have one instance, or one character object of Steve in our scene. We're getting into the weeds here, so let's move on. Alright, so back to the interface. We click on Steve, and you'll see we get these little gizmos here. If I turn that off, you'll see that all of our overlays and everything go away in the scene, and we can just see it for what it is. You might want to use that if you're trying to play back an animation and you don't want all this stuff on your screen, but technically you just don't have to have anything selected and you'll get the same result. And we have our aspect ratio, what this does is forces the view, whether that's the 3D view or a camera view, which we'll get to later, into what the aspect ratio is for your final render, so that way you can see exactly what your camera is going to be seeing and not this whole thing, which, you know, the sides wouldn't actually be rendering out. Up here we have our grid overlay. This is a good use for your rule of thirds, you know, if you want to learn what that is, where you're trying to compose your scenes. Well, you can bring that up. You can also customize how many lines you actually see there. This here is for your particles. We have particles in the scene. We can turn them on or off because they will, you know, affect the performance of your computer. So if you want to have particles in your scene but not see them all the time, you can disable them, and that way you can kind of animate a little bit more efficiently without the program slowing down. We have flat mode. This means no lighting. We have shaded mode, and you can see there's a little bit of a look to him there. Turn that off. He's the same color. Turn it on. You can see there's a little bit of shading. And then we have render mode. This is what your final animation will look like. Rendered shadows, etc. It's beautiful. Then finally we have the enable secondary viewport. Click on that, and now we have two of the same screen. If we had a camera in our scene, you can see here it says active camera, then that's what would actually be in here. So let's go ahead and do that. We're gonna go into our workbench, create camera, and now you'll see that we can move around in this scene, and this stays the same because it is showing what our camera showed. So how am I moving around the scene? Well, if I'm left clicking and dragging my mouse around, I am orbiting. You'll kind of orbit whatever the middle of your screen is, an object that you've clicked on, things like that. You'll start to kind of orbit around them very intuitively. If I right click with my mouse and I move it around, then I'm kind of got a first person view. I'm looking around from the perspective of my camera, my viewport here. If while I'm holding right click, I hit the W key, I'm moving forward, S backwards, A left, D right. If you've played Minecraft or any other first person shooter, then you know how those controls work, but you have to be holding right click in the viewport, same as with the camera. I can actually animate the camera, move it around in the scene using those same controls. Just right click in the corresponding viewport. If I want to fine tune my movement here, it's a bit fast if I was trying to position the camera, I can hold the shift key while I do this and it slows it down just a bit. And if I hold the space key, it speeds it up quite a bit, and we can actually change those in our preferences. So let's just take a quick dive into the preferences real quick, and we have all of our options. This is where you can see that we're in advanced mode and not simple. Down here you see copy work camera into new camera. So if you notice when we spawned the camera in, it was at the exact same angle that our work camera was in. Well, that setting is what does that, and this is all pretty much fine, so we don't need to go into those settings. We're just going to go on down to interface here. So in our interface here, we can actually change the theme. Whoa, that's blinding. And that's dark, and then we have darker. And you can also change the color of other aspects of the interface here. I don't know what color I like. What color should I go with here? I like that color. It's a little bit me. All right, so we have compact panels. If we click on that, then you'll see that this whole thing kind of shrinks a little bit. If you need some more real estate on your screen, you can do that and kind of make things more compact. Compact timeline list, same thing. If you notice the spacing here between our timelines, if I click this, boop, it makes them a little less spaced out. It might kind of make it challenging to select things accurately sometimes, you know, with the timelines being a little closer together. But if you need the extra space, then, you know, there you go. So rather than go through all of these one by one, I'm just going to skip through the ones that we need immediately. You can play with these and figure out what they all do. One thing I like to have is Z is up. That means instead of Y being the up and down motion, this is going to be your Z axis that goes up and down. Then you're going to have your X and your Y. That's just a preference I like to have. You can leave it however you like, but just remember from now on, if I say Z, then I'm talking about up and down. And finally, back to what got us started on this little adventure, we're going to go to the Controls tab, and we get the move speed here. This is when you click in here and you move around. We're at speed 1. I can reduce that, let's say 0.5, hit enter, and you'll see I move a little bit slower here. So what I'm actually going to do is leave that at 1. I think that's a good speed. And the fast modifier, this is how fast you go when you hold the space key. You'll see the slow modifier is 0.25, meaning we move a quarter of the speed of the the move speed there. And I actually like to have it just a little slower, so I put that on 1.5. And then as you can see, I can get a little bit more of a fine tune. I can obviously slow that down even more if I wanted to, but that's what I like. Alright, so now that we're done with that slog, let's go ahead and actually close this little window. Once again, if we lose it, we can always bring it back right there. We can also just click this button on and off. Can't make up my mind. Okay, we're going to leave it off. So we've got these here, and what you can see is we've got several different gizmos here to play with. We have these are up and down. Remember, like I said, the Z. You'll see that these are the values, the numerical values. So if I actually wanted to zero this out, I can reset all values. Boop. And that puts Steve at 0. This is basically, the origin of our scene here. All zeros. So you can move the character like this. Y, X, and Z. And we can rotate them using this. Just like so. And then these little gizmos actually allow you to kind of move around more in a three-dimensional way on that particular axis. So this is this kind of don't match up. This is our x-axis, but it's the color of the y. But maybe they did that to why is it that way? But as you can see here, I can click on that and I can actually move Steve up and down and back and forth on that axis. So that just gives you a little bit more freedom with the movements of the character. Once again, I can reset those values by clicking on that and reset that value by clicking on that. And there we go. Now he's back to normal. So these are the gizmos you have. As you can see over here, these are all highlighted in yellow. If I click on the scale tool, then you'll see that all those go away and we now have a different set of tools there. And look at that. If I click on that one, it does that. Click on this one, it just scales on Z. This one scales on our y-axis. This one scales on X. But again, just like the other move tools, if I click on this, you can kind of scale across a couple of different axes at the same time. Steve looks like he's underwater. Conversely, if I go to these, I can actually just select one at a time. So there's our bend tool, but right now we don't have anything that we can bend. Let's click on his arm right there and you'll see that we now have a little bendy do, and that's all that it shows though. So if I click on rotation, now we also have this rotation. If I click rid of bend, then we just have the rotation. If I click on the move tool, now we have move and rotation. But if I click off the rotation, now we just have move. But generally, I don't think you really need that level of specificity, so I'm just gonna go ahead and turn those all back on so that we have the ability to do whatever we want when we want, and we can bend, we can rotate, and we can move all in one go. As you can see, it gets a little bit cluttered there, so that's why you might would want to select these on and off, but now you know. Okay, so we've got our camera, we've got our character, we know how to move things around. Let's go ahead and venture into the next part of the interface, which is the environment. So with the environment tab, we can actually adjust what our scene is going to look like, just kind of the default parameters. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on render mode so that we can see our shadows. And we've got the time here, and we can adjust the time of day. You can see that the sun and the moon are generated by default within Mine-imator, and as we change the time, it changes everything for us, and it looks pretty good. We can click on rotate here, and that's going to change the direction of the sun in our scene. So if I put it like this and then I take it down, you'll see that the sun is now over there. I can rotate it and you'll see we're rotating the sun's position around. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so we've got the time of day, we've got our angle set up. Steve's looking pretty beautiful, but let's actually adjust this a bit. We can now go to the sun's strength and the sun angle. As you can see here, the angular diameter of the sun changes the size of sun shadows. So first, I want to get my strength. I feel like this is kind of a weak sun. I like my sun to be a little brighter. Maybe 200%, maybe a bit much. Let's try 150%. I feel like that looks a little better. Actually looks like Steve's got some real sunlight on his face. And let's change the angle here. If we go down lower to 0, then I think we're gonna have the sharpest shadows you can have. So if I go up, then you can see we get softer shadows. And you can see like when I click and move around, that changes the rendering. So it's only once you stop and let the program do its thing. And you see we got some actually good looking shadows there. They start out sharp and then they get softer as they go up. Advanced rendering. This is why you want to use Mine-imator 2.0 over the previous versions. Now let's go to our sky background. We have Minecraft, or we can do custom where you can actually bring in an image skybox. You know, we're not going to do that right now, but you can see that it kind of changed things. If I go back to Minecraft, gives us back our Minecraft default options here. We got a moon texture, we got a sun texture, we got a moon phase, so we can actually change the shape of the moon. So I can click on, and we're on full moon, I can go to new moon, first quarter, etc. So if you don't want to just have that default very beautiful big succulent moon there, then we can actually change that. Next up, clouds. Let's go to our clouds. We got normal. As you can see, they're normal clouds. Go to faded. Oh, a little bit like what, story mode clouds or something. Or we can do flat. This is for all the pleb PCs out there that can't handle the 3D clouds, I guess, in Minecraft. I don't know. That's a look though, if you want it. We can change the speed of the clouds as 100%. We can bring it down to 25%. And that means they'll move slower. Bring it up to 300%. That means they'll move faster. Right now, they're not really moving much at all, but throughout your animation, they may be moving. To be honest, that kind of throws me off. In the previous versions, the clouds were moving the whole time, so I'm not exactly sure what the deal is with that. Haven't used 2.0 enough. Here I am making a tutorial about it. In any case, we can change the offset, so we can, you know, move the clouds manually if we want to. We can change the height, bring them way down. Let's actually make that a little more noticeable. So if we bring our clouds back, we bring it down. It's got some fog or something, you know, low-hanging clouds, whatever. Change the size. We can bring these way in, make little small clouds, or we can make them enormous and have really spaced out, you know, kind of Midwestern plains kind of clouds. Let's go ahead and reset that. You reset these values by right-clicking, click reset, and now we're back to our default. We can change the thickness. We can have big, thick, you know, maybe thunderous clouds, and we can bring them down, make them maybe not flat clouds, but a little thinner. Something like that, you know. Let's go ahead and make them thick clouds, and we go down here to our cloud color, and we can actually do this, and oh man, we got some storm clouds. Isn't that nifty? Let's go ahead and reset that. That's not too nifty actually. Next up, the ground. So as you can see, by default we just have some ground here, and it's grass. But if we don't want it to be grass, we can come down here to our ground tab, change ground, and then we get this list of all sorts of Minecraft block textures and other textures. Now of course we could import a scene, but sometimes you're going to have this ground visible in the distance, so if you want it to be a grass plain, or maybe you want it to be an island or something, let's see if we can find the water, and then we put a little piece of scenery in here, and we would have kind of an ocean of sorts. Then we have fog, so we'll go to fog here. We got sky fog. As you can see, it kind of has that foggy look back there. If I turn that off, which one is it? This one. There we go. Whoa, that's ugly. So the coolest features here for me, what I like to play with, is distance and fade size. And what that does is, this is 10,000 blocks away or whatever unit it's using, and we can bring that in, and that brings our fog in real close like. And then we can do fade size. So if we go smaller, that means the actual distance between the thickest fog and the thinnest fog is gonna shrink, and if we bring it up, and then it goes further. So like if we bring the distance further out, let's say 10,000, and we bring the fade up, then you'll see that we get more of a gradual fade in, and if we bring it down, it's less of a gradual fade. Who would have thought it? Whoa, what's this? We have a tree in our scene. Okay, so for the next one, which is wind, we needed to have something in here that would be affected by wind. So click on wind, and this is going to adjust how much these leaves here are affected by our wind. So we can turn up speed, let's say 50%. Let's play the animation, and you'll see that it's being affected by wind quite a bit. So if we go back to 10, and I'm playing the animation by hitting the space bar, by the way. You also have these controls here. See, not quite as affected, but we can also turn the strength way up, and it's going a little crazy there. I'm actually kind of liking this look though. Directional speed, directional strength, all these things. We probably need a more full scene to kind of, you know, see what that's all doing, but that should give you a good enough idea of what's happening in your scene here and how these settings affect things. So I've reset that, but that is also something to note. If you turn the wind off, then you're not going to have any movement. So if you kind of want to have a non-shader look, you know, where Minecraft is just kind of looking like Minecraft in your animation, then you can actually just have the wind off and not have any of those effects applied. Alright, so that's it for the interface for this tutorial. We'll be getting into other aspects of it as we progress through this tutorial series, but that should be enough to get you started and familiar with it. Just go through and play with things, see what things do. Don't be afraid of it. You can always reset to default. That's going to do it for me. Thanks for watching part 1 of this series. Tune in for part 2. We're going to go into importing your worlds and all the little details that go into that. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.